Welcome to the ADHD Women's Wellbeing Podcast. I'm Kate Moore-Youssef, and I'm a wellbeing and lifestyle coach, EFT practitioner, mum to 4 kids, and passionate about helping more women to understand and accept their amazing ADHD brains. After speaking to many women just like me, and probably you, I know there is a need for more health and lifestyle support for women newly diagnosed with ADHD. In these conversations, you'll learn from insightful guests, hear new findings, and discover powerful perspectives and lifestyle tools to enable you to live your most fulfilled, calm, and purposeful life wherever you are on your ADHD journey. Here's today's episode. Hi everyone, welcome back to the ADHD Women's Wellbeing Podcast. I am Kate Moore-Youssef, your host, and today I have someone that I've been really looking for. I say this every week, I really do, but someone I have been really looking forward to because I think all my guests, I've handpicked them myself, and Vivienne is one of those people that I have been waiting to speak to for a while. Vivienne is a clinical associate in psychology working for the NHS with individuals with complex emotion needs in East London. And she is also the founder of ADHD Babes, the first support group for Black women and Black non-binary people with ADHD, where she is the director of community outreach and wellbeing. Since being diagnosed in her early 20s with ADHD and living with mental health difficulties, Vivienne has run awareness sessions and advocated on platforms such as the BBC, Mental Health Today, and Mind. Besides working in mental health, Vivienne is a performing artist, amazing singer, and organises events and creative workshops with a special focus on Black history. Vivienne, it's a pleasure. And I was listening to your music before, and you have the most stunning voice.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll get onto that.
Yeah, thank you.
It's great to meet you. It's really great to meet you. I've been following ADHD Babe, and I love what you do in your community. And I love that you're serving a group of women, people who need to know that they're not alone. And I know that with any woman with ADHD, there is a feeling of feeling quite disconnected, especially if we're living in different communities and areas and big cities, small towns and villages. It feels like we're always the only person on this planet that's going through this. And then when we realize that there's other people really similar to us, and that's what I love about the podcast and connecting with lots of other people in the community, actually we have so many similarities. So many of us are different, but actually the similarities with ADHD are very good for connecting us.
Yeah.
So first of all, I don't know, I'm not sure where to start, but I know you were diagnosed in your 20s. And I guess, did you know anyone else in your family, in your school community that had ADHD as a girl?
Do you know what? No. Like when I think back to ADHD, I think there was one person in secondary school, like one guy that had ADHD, and he got excluded by like year 9. But I think that was actually my only memory of knowing someone with ADHD personally. So yeah, it was very far removed.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, when I was growing up, I've spoken about it on the podcast before, but my brothers were diagnosed really young on in life.
Mm,
I never knew any girls with ADHD. It was just not a thing. And so it was literally only relatively recently, the past few years, that it's been like, okay, now I understand. I guess with ADHD Babes, you're serving the Black community. Is that a thread that you hear a lot, that ADHD in women and non-binary, is that something that they're kind of like thinking, I've not met someone like me before. I've not met someone whose challenges look the same as mine. Is that a
mm.
story that you're hearing a lot of?
Yeah, for sure. Like a lot of people within the community were diagnosed later in life, like whether it's kind of early or late 20s, but there's some people that were diagnosed right up into the mid 50s. So there's definitely like this trend of kind of slipping through the net or, masking enough that people just put it down to quirks or kind of being a little bit of a Walter Mitty, like head in the clouds type personality. And I think it's that presentation of women or people who are assigned female at birth, like the presentation being more the inattentive type rather than in men when the presentation is a bit more hyperactive, impulsive. That's a lot more overt. And yeah, there's something about the covert symptoms just being seen as personality traits rather than like a call for help. And that just adding to people being missed.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, We see that all the time, and I hear that. And I think a lot of my community of women are women who are being diagnosed quite a bit later on in life, probably like 30s, 40s, 50s. And that is that commonality between everybody is the all the what ifs and what how was this missed and all the being able to connect the dots and being able to see. And what astounds me about you is that you've got 2 masters, so you're highly educated. There's clearly a need for you to keep learning. There's a desire, maybe a desire, there's a curiosity,
Yeah.
and when we're interested in something, we wanna keep going and go. First of all, tell me a little bit about the 2 degrees that you've done, and, guess what is that leading towards, and what is it that you wanna be doing in this field?
So I did my undergrad in psychology, and then I was working on like the inpatient wards, mental health inpatient wards for a few years, and I kind of felt like I hit a bit of a glass ceiling where it's either kind of I went back to uni or I would just keep doing the same thing, but very on brand of ADHD, like I find it very hard to concentrate on things that I don't find interesting. So I had to like really search and look for topics. And it was between the masters I did or a master's in psychology and music. It was like mental health and music. And I was really,
Mm,
really torn between the two.
that sounds amazing.
Right? Like till now, I'm like, maybe I should go back. Like, so you never know, I might go back and study that too. But yeah, in the end, I decided on cultural and global perspectives to mental health care, um, because I'm really interested in Black British kind of movements, and I think there's always been studies kind of talking about how much worse off we are in terms of mental health outcomes. So I really wanted to learn about how that can actually be resolved and different ways of understanding mental health, whether it's from an African perspective or an Asian perspective, not just the Western lens. So yeah, I just really wanted to learn about that. I wasn't really sure where it was going to go, but yeah, I just wanted to learn about it. And then yeah, I was just able to apply it a little bit more in my workplace, and eventually another role came up that led to the masters that I did afterwards. That was a apprenticeship master, and it's a very long term. I don't know why they chose such a long title, but it's clinical associate in psychology, and it's a training course to then become a therapist and to be able to offer one-to-one or group therapy. And again, being able to like pull those what I learned in the first masters and focus my dissertation on adapting services to support people from the Black community. So yeah, it's kind of all kind of trickled through because then I can use that when I'm also working in ADHD babes. So I'm not sure how it's going to all come together perfectly, but I'm sure it will eventually.
Don't worry about the how, because I think what you're doing, there's clearly like a very sort of purpose-filled mission there for you, like really personal, and the how that's filtered through with, founding the ADHD babes as well is like serving the Black community.
Mhm.
I mean, what do you hear with regards to mental health, and what do you, obviously from studying and being part of the community and hearing, day to day, what's happened with the mental health side? And I guess how have women specifically been missed when they are coming to medical practitioners and saying, I've got this symptom, I'm feeling this, or I've got this
Mm,
trait, and are they being dismissed? How's it looking? And I guess what's the future? What are you
mm.
seeing?
Yeah, it's really hard. Like the stats are always quite damning. Um, for Black women specifically, they were more likely to struggle with common mental health conditions like anxiety and depression. But then there was this gap of them not having access to talking therapies. And it's quite similar with Black men as well, where they were more likely. I think it was almost 7 times more likely to be diagnosed with psychosis or a psychotic condition in comparison to their white counterparts, but again, we're less likely to get access to talking therapy and we're more likely to be given kind of high dosage of medication or kind of held in more secure, controlled ways within mental health services. So there's definitely a trend of presenting with mental health difficulties, but then not kind of getting the right support. Or the support that's being given is very heavy-handed. So yeah, I think it's quite difficult. There's lots of reasons why people don't feel comfortable kind of reaching out to services in the first place, and then people trying to reach out and then feeling like services aren't very accommodating or understanding of cultural differences. So yeah, that's why I'm really interested in culturally adapted and culturally sensitive services because ultimately, people are different and accommodating people's differences is part of what psychology is supposed to do. and mental health and health services in general. So yeah, I think that's the gap of kind of how do we meet people where they are, and yeah, I'm not sure if that's been done enough yet.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like, from my perspective, and I don't know anywhere near as much as you, but it feels like we're really behind. And, for a certain community to be felt like they're not being looked after or listened to the same way as another community, it feels like what era are we living in? And especially with, if we go back to the ADHD, where it almost feels like if you go to your GP, you have to over explain yourself, and you've got to
Hmm.
come with huge amounts of advocacy, and you've
Yeah.
got to be able to have done all that research yourself, and almost kind of like present this case and
Yeah.
hope that the GP goes, okay, I believe you. And that's what frustrates me most, is that when women come to me, or any listeners come to me, and they sort of say to me, I'm really nervous, I've got a GP appointment, I've got a doctor's appointment, and I'm worried I'm not going to be able to get my words out, I'm not going to be able to articulate myself. What happens if they ask me questions and I don't know, especially if they ask me about what I was like at school or growing up. And very often we have like memory issues, or there's been trauma,
Yeah.
and huge parts of our childhood have kind of just been like blanked
Hmm.
out.
It's a block.
Yeah, there is a massive block there. And
Mm.
so there's the nerves often get in the way. And then again, I get these messages from women saying, I've been to the GP, and he didn't think it was ADHD, and I've been, given anxiety or, antidepressants. And it's really frustrating and upsetting. And I think what you're able to do, you're serving a community, is, I think, similar to what I'm doing, is that when they're struggling to be seen, they're struggling to be listened to, there's a holding space there, because there's nowhere else for them to go, because they're waiting for diagnoses,
Yep.
a 7-year waiting list. To know that there's a community there that gets them, you're not asking them for a proper diagnosis. I always say, you come to my community, whether it's you have a suspicion there's ADHD there, or you've had like, a full diagnosis, because I think just to know that there's people around you that
Exactly.
you're like-minded.
Yeah.
How do you see it growing? Is like, especially in the Black community, is the awareness growing? Is the understanding growing about what ADHD looks like? And is there, I guess, more of a vulnerability opened up to be able for women and anyone really in the community to be able to talk about it and say, actually, I see this in myself, but I possibly see this in my parents and generations, and maybe that's where dysfunction, addiction, lots of, childhood issues have come from. I mean, are you seeing that sort of breakdown now of people being able to say,
Mm.
okay, I understand?
Yeah, I think, yeah, short answer, yes, for sure. But, the long response to that is, I think there is this weird, it's so odd because sometimes I look at like, I'll watch social media and there's a group of people that are saying what you're saying, where they're like, do you know what? It's really hard to get through these doors and to, get the right support, especially if you're a woman, because women are less likely to be diagnosed until later on in life. And it's a very strange condition where you literally have to convince people that, yeah, I'm actually struggling with something, because the symptoms are things that, yes, people might experience. Someone might lose their keys once in a while, but it's not as simple as I've just lost my keys. It's something that is consistent, but because of the description of it, it's sometimes undermined, or it's seen as, it's not that serious, it's not that deep kind of thing. So there's this whole kind of group of people that are saying, look, you're validated here, whether or not it's a clinical diagnosis, at least come and feel what the community is like, and see how you can make sense of it and validate yourself. And then on the flip side, there's a bunch of people that are like, go and get a clinical diagnosis right now, you can't self-diagnose, where did all these ADHDs come? And I'm just like, oh god, like, it's such a weird split. Then obviously the medical services are somewhere in between, where some GPs are very open and understanding, and they actually advocate for some of their patients. But then I've heard horror stories of GPs saying, there's no such thing as adult ADHD. So it's a really weird field at the moment. But yeah, it's amazing that there's spaces like yours where actually people can just be held until they feel ready and sure to go there, or even just being in the space sometimes makes people confident enough to then go and ask for help. And someone said it in one of the support groups, where even if you have a diagnosis or not, you have a need, and focusing on what that need
Mm.
is a great starting point, because nobody can invalidate the fact that you're struggling with something, whether there's a label or not. And then the more we've kind of had conversations, because every support group there's a different topic. I think it was even this year we spoke about parenthood, and a lot of people could resonate with the idea that actually, if I had it, someone else in my family probably has it because it's a genetic condition. And then being able to kind of piece together, like, oh, when my parent did X or they couldn't do Y, is that because they also had undiagnosed ADHD? And because they were undiagnosed, is that why they didn't notice that I had it, or they dismissed it if any teachers did kind of pull anything up, and how that then has a ripple effect. And I think it's difficult because when one person doesn't know, it does kind of ripple until one person stops it. And there was that consensus of actually this is the generation that is naming what it is, so that the generation that comes after, they will have a platform. And I think it works. Like I can't remember who I was saying this to, but my niece was kind of showing symptoms of ADHD. So I kind of got her to my laptop and started emailing her college, like, hi, it runs in the family. I'm seeing symptoms. She needs support. And she was able to at least get an educational diagnosis. So, even though it wasn't in childhood, she still got it, 10 years earlier than I got it, which is a difference.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I do think that having the space together to speak about these things, being able to just piece it into like a wider picture, it almost vindicates you and it makes it easier to see where there's solutions.
Yeah, I think it's so amazingly articulated, because I do think we are this generation now of hopefully breaking generational cycles and being able to see where the breakdowns of the family has come from. And yeah, we can sometimes say we had a dysfunctional family. This person had addictions, that person had depression, that person had financial issues, that person couldn't cope in a family environment. And for me, for sure, I've been able to go through my family tree and see that. But also, I think it offers a level of compassion and forgiveness, and being able
100%.
to see your family through a new lens instead of like
Mm.
blame and anger and resentment. Kind of be like, like compassion for all the lack of resources that they had, and understanding. But we are getting the last dregs, I think, of the old school
Yeah.
patriarchal society.
Yeah.
So but in a way, it's quite cool, because we're kind of breaking those stigmas down, and it feels really hard and it feels really exhausting. But in a way, it also feels like, wow, we are, in just a few years, there has been a massive shift. If you think about it, ADHD in women 5 years ago, was it a topical conversation? No, it wasn't all over social media. It wasn't in the news. We weren't being asked to advocate. So there's obviously been a shift, and I think it's been quite fast. And for us to know that we've hopefully made a bit of a mark in our different communities and opened up conversations and support and everything, one day we'll be able to look back and be like, actually, okay, hopefully
Yeah.
the tide, there's been a turning of the tide there.
Yeah. 100%.
And what I wanted to ask you is that, do you see yourself as like a lifelong learner? Because I see that in ADHD a lot, that we are like, oh, we've learned that, we've done that, next thing. Is that what you see in yourself?
Yeah. And you know what? It's kind of a blessing and a curse because before I even finished the last masters, I was like, oh, looking online, like I was like, you need to stop because at some stage you're gonna have to rest and like reset your brain. But it's weird. It's like after everything is interest based, and that's what kind of gets me through it. But it's like it feels like a bit of a video game where it's like you achieve one level and then the minute you finish, you're just beamed into the next level. Like there's always another task.
Do you give yourself time to reflect and look back and actually congratulate yourself and be like, wow, Vivienne, what I've just accomplished is massive?
Mm.
Because I don't,
Yeah.
and I wish I did, and I don't know how. And I just wondered for you, obviously I'm saying to you, oh my God, this is amazing. Look, you've got 2 masters. But have you ever given yourself that same pat on the back?
Um, Not really. This time last year, I graduated from the first masters because COVID kind of messed it all up. And I remember I forgot that the graduation was happening because obviously, yeah, ADHD and it was so long ago. So I kind of like last minute messaged some friends like, "Hey, should we all go out to eat? I'm going to graduate." Um, and then I remember my friend kind of saying that they're really proud because they had told me months before that I need to like take stock of things that I've done, even if it means just asking friends to go out for a meal to specifically celebrate that thing. So that was like one occasion where I'm like, okay, I'd actually intentionally organize something to celebrate an achievement. And I was really proud of that. But otherwise, not really. Yeah, it's kind of, oh, what's the next thing? Oh, what else is on the to do list? Which I know isn't good because it doesn't give you space to actually take stock, and it can make you feel like you've never achieved anything if you're always thinking about what's the next thing to
Mhm.
do.
That's exactly it, isn't it? It's like you feel like you've not achieved because you've already once you've got to that place, you've already moved on.
Yeah.
Like, in your head, you've moved on from there, and
Mhm.
you've kind of been like, "Right, what's next?"
Exactly.
Um, and it kind of yeah, I'm like making me it's making me think as well, but it's that intentionality, isn't it, of going, "Right, we're gonna celebrate this. There's gonna be a milestone. We're gonna have a meal. We're gonna have a drink. Like, we're gonna go and, I don't know, go away or do something
Yeah.
because otherwise we can it's just this juggernaut of achievement and productivity." And I'm just curious, like maybe from a well-being perspective, how do you balance, the working, the studying, and do you do you feel the burnout? Do you get overwhelmed? Like, how do you manage that?
Yeah, I definitely do get overwhelmed and burnt out. Like I had to take some time off last year because it was just all way too much to balance. And I think it was difficult because I was the first cohort of this course in London. Even on a structural level, like everything was new. So there wasn't kind of anyone to say, "Oh, how did you manage last year?" or kind of ask for advice in that sense. Like we were kind of the first ones. The way I manage it in general is I time block my days. I've done a lot of CBT, and I still kind of keep a lot of the techniques that I learned through there, whereas, really planning out my week in advance. It helps with my ADHD and for my mood because I can say, Thursdays is ADHD babes day, and Tuesdays is a music day, and Sunday is a rest day. Just really being intentional about that. And sometimes that doesn't work because if there's lots to do on a Thursday for ADHD babes and it spills over, then I'm still going to be thinking about it all weekend. So I'm not really relaxed.
Yeah.
It can get really, really hard. I do sometimes just have to take breaks. And I think I'm just learning to be okay with that, that sometimes I don't have enough energy. Sometimes I'm tired, and that's okay. It's not the end of the world.
Yeah, I think that's it, isn't it? Is like knowing, like, first of all, giving yourself that compassion and then being
Mm.
able to explain and be honest with your community, especially, the fact that it's all volunteered, and you're giving your time. But I think the most important thing is, is looking after you and knowing that we always have to have these boundaries. You see, I'm so tempted, I would love to go back and study. I would love to go and do a master's, and I almost did, a positive psychology degree,
Oh,
master's
nice.
in positive psychology just before the
Mm.
pandemic, and I was gonna sign up. It was at Liverpool, and I was literally I'd got everything. I'd got all my references, I'd written my personal statement, I'd been accepted. It was, like, massive, and something was just, like, holding me back, and it was I can't remember if I'd been diagnosed or not. I'm not sure if I had the official diagnosis, but I'd started understanding that there was something going on, and I always knew that I had this propensity for overwhelm and anxiety and burnout and procrastination, and I was working, I had my kids, and there was this voice in my head that kept saying, "Do you want this? Do you want this on your head? Like, is what's this gonna do? What's this gonna make you? Like, what kind of mum is this gonna make you?" And even though the personal desire was there to study, to learn, to grow, to evolve, something was telling me it's not the right time, it's not the right time. And I was meant to start in the September, October of 2019. And I was thinking, actually, if I had done it with the pandemic and everything, that would have been crazy. My kids homeschooling. So it was kind of like almost like this intuitive guidance I was getting. Like, not the right
Yeah.
time. This is not the right time. Um, but it did make me think. It did make me assess. It made me look, and I was thinking, am I cut out for it? Am I cut out? And but in a way, I do want to prove something to myself that I do want to carry on studying because when was at uni first time round, which was pretty long ago, my ADHD was in full swing, but I just didn't know it. I really didn't. I didn't fulfill my potential. I struggled. Didn't manage to get to class on time. everything was like my notes were a mess. I found it so hard at university. So I was just thinking, do I want to do that to myself again? Now with kids, now with work, now with everything. Um, do you have? I mean, do you have any words of advice if there's someone that's listening that's in a similar situation about going back to study with the awareness of ADHD, and what tools you've used that have really helped you with your, I guess, your productivity, but also your well-being? Because I think it was my
Mm,
well-being that I was more worried about than anything else.
yeah. No, 100%. I think you made 100% the best decision. I think like every decision we make has an impact, and the reality is like we have lots of different identities within ourselves. So, like you named a few, like mother, you as a human being and your well-being, interest in positive psychology. And then when we make certain decisions, it does kind of move the bricks around a little bit, or it kind of, if we're holding all these bricks in our hands, like adding on one brick might like start making us walk to the left, or it might be too difficult to carry altogether. So I think realistically, especially with ADHD, I feel like I have to be really intentional about things I take on, because I know the reality is if I feel overwhelmed, what that feels like is not the same as what it feels like to a neurotypical person. The amount of time it takes to recover and to get out of it is, I have to be careful. I have to really, really think about it. And that even if it's something as small as, I don't want to go out 2 nights in a row because it's going to take me 4 days to recover. Like I have to genuinely consider those things. And I think it's the same with education, where I made the decision to do it the first time because it I could feel I was getting um, stagnant in my role, and that feeling was something that I couldn't deal with anymore. So it was like out of the options, kind of, yeah, I can decide to stay in work, or I'm gonna try and do their studies, and that's gonna motivate me forward because it's something new, it's something exciting. But then to balance it, I started doing reduced hours. So even though I was making less money, it meant that I had more mental time to be like, okay, I had uni today, and now I can just sleep for the rest of the day. And I did that for the year because that's what I needed to do to get through. So I think generally managing uni, because I had the support at uni, I had the extra time, I handed in all my assignments late. All the tutors knew that I had it, so they would give me extra help, and I could email and ask questions and things like that. But also just in general, my life was quite different for that year. Like I was a lot less social. I didn't have as much time to, more so this last masters, I had a lot less time to do music. I think I only organized one event last year, whereas before I would do events every few months. Um, so yeah, it does. Like when I look at it like a kind of, well, there's the spoon analogy where it's like, if I've got 10 spoons for the day, when you study, it does take out a chunk of it. So I think it's making a decision to how can I accommodate with the spoons I have left? What am I going to have to let go of? If I say yes to the masters, I'm going to have to say no to something else, and just kind of accepting if that's okay. And if it's not, then that's fine. We get to choose. And I think that does, sometimes it makes me sad because I'm like, if I was neurotypical, would I even need to think this much about it? Could I just, because like we finished the masters and some people were like, yeah, I'm going to apply for the doctorate. And I thought, I need a year to just breathe. I don't know how you can even imagine like studying again. But I think there's always pros and cons to everything. And yeah, I have to be more intentional and careful about decisions I make. But on the flip side, it means that I'm part of this community, which I find to be such full of such beautiful people. It means that my brain thinks differently to others, and I can think of new ideas, and I can be spontaneous, and all the good things I enjoy about it. So I think there's just a level of acceptance that has helped me. And with the acceptance comes the accommodations as well.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I think, what you're learning on the ground as well
Mm.
is going to always help you put all the theory into practice. And I'm sure, I have no doubt that you probably will go on and to do the doctorate at some point. And then
Let's
the fact
see.
that you've got all this, I'm not saying like next year or something, but I
Yeah.
have a feeling that you probably like, you can see it in the distance.
Yeah.
And the fact that you are like, working in the community and you're volunteering and you're listening and you're hearing the stories, it's always gonna, that's kind of what I think now. Like if I'd done the masters in positive psychology, that would have taken me away from the clients and from the working with the people in my collective and really understanding and sort of hearing, person by person what is going on, as opposed to it just being from my experience. And that's what, for me, I'm still learning. I'm just not getting the certificate. And
Yeah.
I know that it is lovely to have that validation, but sometimes the learning can come in different ways. I think anyone can agree that at the moment, modern life can feel pressurized, and at any one time, our bodies are dealing with a range of different stresses that could be physical, emotional, biological, or environmental, and even more so, we feel this with ADHD. So I am delighted that the Herb Tender is sponsoring today's episode. The Herb Tender supplements have been designed with ADHD in mind, and they offer a range of different wellness supplements, all formulated with adaptogens and functional mushrooms to help us manage these stresses of modern day living, enabling us to live a healthier, calmer, and more focused life. Adaptogens help us find equilibrium and possess numerous beneficial powers from reducing stress, aiding sleep, to enhancing focus, performance, and immunity. And the Herb Tender supplements also contain powerfully intelligent herbs to help normalize our internal systems, regulate physiological function, and restore metabolic balance. I've been taking these supplements regularly now for the past month, and I can really notice a difference, which is why I'd love you to give them a go too. And I have a couple of favorites of mine and for anyone with ADHD, which are the Focus and Clarity, which have obvious benefits for ADHD brains. And these can be taken in the day whenever you need to just get your head down and focus. I take mine in the morning, and I really notice what a productive, good few hours I have. And then I have the Calm and Collected, which I take towards the end of the afternoon, in the evening, when I don't need to be productive anymore. I want to encourage more rest and more relaxation. And it really does help us wind down after a very busy day. And it also helps manage anxiety and contributes to better sleep and just makes us feel calmer as well when we wake up in the morning. So I really highly recommend the Calm and Collected. So if you would like to give them a go, the Herb Tender is offering us a 20% discount. So if you head to the-herbtender.com, so that's the-herbtender.com, and you type in the discount code KateMore20, so that's KATEMORE 20, Kate More 20. You will get 20% off any supplements on the website. I really would recommend giving them a go. And even if you just want to try the Focus and Clarity and the Calm and Collected just to get you started, I would definitely recommend these. Now back to today's episode. What's interesting, just going back to that, is that sometimes if you go to a doctor or a psychiatrist and they are still quite old-fashioned or not that experienced in ADHD, and they go, but look how educated you are. Look, you've managed to get through school and you never got flagged up, or you got through university, or you've got a master's. And again, I speak to so many women who are like ridiculously educated with ADHD, and they have managed to achieve things that probably has taken like twice or three times the amount of energy
Exactly.
than someone neurotypical, but they've still done it. And that is what people don't see. And it's that invalidation of like, you can't have ADHD because look, you're a doctor, look, you're an accountant. And it's
Mm,
just like, it's crazy
it's
because it's just no one
ridiculous.
can see
The
the
struggle.
internal. Yeah.
Yeah. Honestly, I call it flat out ableism, because to assume that achievement is incomprehensible with ADHD, it's an ableist concept, because it's assuming that ADHD means a lack of an ability to achieve anything, or a lack of an ability to apply yourself to something. And when you speak to people that are able to make it through higher education, it's often because the topic they're doing is of specific interest to them. It's often because they've found a bunch of people who have carried them through the course, or they've had a really good friend who would share notes with them and ask them when they're coming to class and all these things. Like, do you know what I
Yes,
mean? They found,
totally.
oh gosh,
Yeah.
I had, to this day, I always remember the girl in second year who every time I missed the class, she was like, Viv, you weren't there today. Viv, we have a deadline. Viv. And she genuinely got me through second year. Without her, I would have failed.
Yeah.
So I think there's this misunderstanding that if you have ADHD, you can't achieve. And like you said, because people don't see how much more effort it takes to do it, they think, well, you've done it, full stop. And again, that's just a misconception of how disability works, that sometimes people can do the thing but the amount of effort and time it takes to do the thing is what makes it a disabling act. This what means that, now they have a week out to try and recover from that, and that's not the way it needs to be. What they need is the right accommodations, the right support, so that they can do it and still have a quality of life and not, be flat out from achievement. It really grinds my gears when people do that.
Yeah, no, I'm exactly the same. And I just had my daughter before. She'd been building up in her head about this one piece of work that she had to do. And I mean, bless her, she's only 11, she's nearly 12. And she kept saying to me, I can't do it. I can't do it. I don't know how I'm going to do it. And she's been diagnosed ADHD. And the effort and the mental tax it took on her just to know that it was coming, it was building up. She knew she had to hand it in. Just to be able to sit down and actually start it was probably the hardest thing. So thank goodness we've kind of recognized it, like the body doubling thing
Yeah,
really works for her, that I just have to sit with her and I just sit her down. It's almost like right, let's get the computer, let's get all the pens, let's get the paperwork, let's sit down. And she's like, okay, I've done the hard thing. I've actually started.
yeah,
And then I literally start her off. I just kind of go, well, what do you think about this? And what about that? Like, let's start with this sentence. And once I got her going, that was it. She was flying. But the hardest thing for her was the getting through that mental barrier of, I can't do it. I don't know how to do it. I don't know where to start. The overwhelm was there. And I wish that that was also taken into consideration for teachers, I think, because that piece of work, I mean, she's a clever girl. She just did it. To start it was the hardest thing. And I remember that feeling so well,
hmm
of like the overwhelm of like, where do I start? I've got to write a dissertation. I've got to write an essay. And
it's huge. The concept of it is so big, and the automatic process of, okay, it's an intro and a body and a discussion, and that doesn't come automatically. All you see is 5,000 words, 10,000 words, and that's too much. It's way too much. And I think and that's why when people are like, oh, just do it. It's like, it's not just do it, because if it was that simple, then I would have done it a long time ago. Because like you said, it's not that we don't have the knowledge. It's the accommodation. It's the dopamine difficulties. It's the executive functioning of, I need to start this task, and just literally feeling like your car is jump starting. It's really hard, because when you explain it to people, it can be so easily diminished to, you're just being lazy, or you just need to try harder. And that's why I find so much solace in speaking to other people who understand, because we know that we want to do the thing. Like, lazy is not
mhm.
applicable, because laziness is like an unwillingness to want to do it. There is a huge willingness, it's just very difficult.
Yeah, and it just shows how just have like an understanding person there, whether they've got ADHD or not, just for them to kind of get it, just for them to understand that this is what we need, like your friend in second year, just that like little nudge in the right direction, or that person that just sits at your kitchen table, or a partner or a friend that can just give you that push or that help or that support just when you need it. And yeah, it is. And once you've got that little kind of um, that golden circle, that inner circle of people that you can rely on, it does make things a bit easier. Which is why having a community is brilliant, because for us to be able to just say that, then we both just got it.
Yeah.
We didn't have to go into too
Nope.
much detail. We just yeah.
Yeah, what's understood doesn't need to be explained.
Yeah, totally.
Mm.
So tell me, just before we finish, what I know that your music is obviously like a creative outlet.
Mhm.
It's something that you are so talented at, but also would you say that's like a well-being side for you? Is that like calming?
Mm.
Or is it something else that you add to your kind of like to-do list achievements?
Oh, it's a little bit of both. Like, the actual singing side of things, where like, I'm with the band and we're performing, or like we're making new music. That part of it is super soothing. Um, the kind of boring admin part is like, oh, have you posted to social media this week? Have you edited a video? Have you applied for this music grant? Like, all those parts that, if I had a manager or an agent or something, they could do, or sending invoices, the bane of my life. All of those parts are like, they're part of work life. But the actual like creation of it, going to open mics, anytime I get to perform, even just rehearsal spaces, like, yeah, I really leave like feeling energized.
Yeah. So if someone had to say to you music or psychology and learning, and you had to choose one of like a road to success, what would you choose?
I think I'd choose music. Yeah, and I just read articles in the evenings or something. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if I had a God-given talent like being musical or
Mm.
being able to sing, I think I'd probably choose that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wish I could. Honestly, I love listening to music.
Mm.
I'm like a massive music fan,
Nice.
but unfortunately, I've not been given the talents of musicality.
It's
But yeah,
okay.
I always just admire. Sadly, not. But I just really admire when I see someone with that like raw talent. I'm kind of like, oh, do something with it. So yeah, I'm kind of like pushing you to keep going
Thank
with the
you.
music for sure.
No, thank you. This year I'm making a lot more time for it.
That's great because I guess that also feeds into your soul, doesn't it? It feeds into that part of you that studying I don't think does, and working and learning, even though it's really amazing when we connect with people and we do that, but when we're creative and we're able to express ourselves creatively, um, it's just I think it does feed another part of our soul. But I also think it's different times, like things come at different
Mm.
times and different ages, and different parts of our life when other things are more important, and we ebb and flow. So you never know, you might have like a whole musical career ahead of you and you
Yeah,
don't
I
know
hope so.
it.
That would be great.
Oh, well, it's been really lovely speaking to you, and it's really amazing to connect with other people who are holding space in the ADHD community. And I hope that we can do more things together because for me, I would love to see more diversity in the ADHD therapeutic world as well. I feel that there's not enough diversity there, and I think there needs to be that. So all people who are suddenly realizing that they've got ADHD can feel like they are heard and understood. So I think whatever you do in the future in this therapeutic role, I'm sure you'll be, serving lots of people who need it.
Thank you. No, thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed the convo.
Thank you so much for joining me on today's episode. I hope you found what you were looking for in this conversation, and it's helped guide you towards some further self-healing, self-exploration, and most importantly, self-acceptance. And if you have enjoyed this conversation and would like to experience more of my work, such as access to exclusive live workshops and opportunities for group coaching sessions, connecting with other like-minded women, and a general feeling of belonging, please come and check out my monthly membership, the ADHD Women's Wellbeing Collective. I've made it as affordable as possible, and I offer you lots of resources and opportunities for connection and support from other women all around the world being diagnosed with ADHD later on in life. I'd absolutely love to see you there. All the details are in this episode's show notes or on my website, adhdwomenswellbeing.co.uk. See you in the next episode.